Dividing whole numbers by decimals. Learning goal. I can explain how to divide a whole number by a decimal. So let's start with the question 12 divided by 2. Another way of looking at that is, what is 12 when it's broken into pieces that are the size of 2? We start with a number line, and we've got from 0 to 12, and we're going to break it up into chunks that are the size of 2. And when we do that, we see that we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. So, not surprisingly, 12 divided by 2 is equal to 6. And similarly, 5 divided by 2, we follow the same approach. We've got a number line that goes to 5. We're breaking it up into bite-sized chunks that are 2 in size. And of course, we've got 2 pieces that are 2 in length. But then we have a piece left over here that's just 1 in length. So the answer then to 5 divided by 2, we've got 2 full chunks. So that gives us the 2. And then we've got 1 sort of half chunk. So it's 1 out of 2, right? So there were 2 pieces in each chunk. And here we only have 1 of those chunks. So that makes it a half. So 5 divided by 2 is equal to 2.5. This question says, choose a whole number for the blank to make the sentence true. Then draw a picture to show why your choice makes sense. So we were given a number where they left it blank and they said something divided by 0.4 is 5 or close to 5. So I suggested the number 2, and I drew a number line that goes from 0 to 2. Now we're going to look at that number line and look at where 0.4 ends up on the number line. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So there's a 0.4 chunk. Then we go another 0.4. Then another 0.4. Then another 0.4. And then we've got a final 0.4. In doing that, we can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces that are 0.4 in length. So 2 divided by 0.4 is equal to 5, but that also means that 5 times 0.4 would be equal to 2, because we've got 5 pieces that are 0.4 in length. In the second part, in part B, 6.5 divided by 1.3 is 5 or close to 5. Again, I've drawn out a number line that goes from 0 to 6.5. Then in red, I marked out the increments that are 0.3. Technically, what I marked out were increments that were 1/3, which is equal to 0.33. So it's very close to 0.3, not exactly, but I figured for the purpose of this, it would be a reasonable place to start. So now we've got 6.5 divided by 1.3. I've got my timeline of 6.5. So I'm going to mark out 1.3. Let's go from 0 to 1, and then another 0.3. So there's my first 1.3 chunk. Now I've got, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4/3 effectively. Now I'm going to go 4 more thirds, so another 1.3. So I'm going to go to here and 2, 1, 2, 3. There's another 4/3. Then another 1, 2, 3. Another 4/3. And another 4/3. Now we don't quite get another full one here at the end. We're a little bit short. But we know we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then almost 5. So we're very close to having 5 full 1.3s in 6.5. If you think about that then as a multiplication, that would mean that 5 times 1.3 should come out close to 6.5. If we do that multiplication of 5 times 1.3, of course we will find that it comes out to 6.5. What we actually did in our diagram was 5 times 1.33, which will be a little bit bigger at 6.65. But in this case we were asked to come up with numbers that were close to 5. So the fact that we didn't end up at exactly the right number, maybe the number should have been 4.9, maybe it should have been 5.1, but the point is we're close to 5. Any division question can be turned into a multiplication question. So If 10 divided by 2 equals 5, then 5 times 2 is equal to 10. We're simply going backwards through what we just did there. 5 times 2 is equal to 10. 8 divided by 2 is therefore equal to what? It can be restated as 2 times what is equal to 8. So in some circumstances, reframing the question into multiplication may help trigger you to understand better what the ultimate answer is. Choose a whole number for the blank to make the sentence true and explain why your choice makes sense. So we've got some number divided by 0.2 is equal to 125 or close to 125. So we've got some number divided by 0.2 is equal to 125. And I remember that I can kind of work it backwards, doing multiplication, to get what this original number was. So I can then change my equation into 125 times 0.2 and do that math. If I do that, if you remember, I'll do it on the side here as a multiplication. 2 times 5 is 10, 1 to carry, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, 1 times 2 is 2, 250. I have one decimal place here, so I move my decimal one position and I end up with 25.0. So we can say then that 25 divided by 0.2 is equal to 125. Part B, we have the same kind of question, but this time the unknown is the decimal that we're going to be dividing by. So choose a whole number for the blank to make the sentence true. So we've got 12 divided by something is equal to 25. That also means that 25 times that something that we don't know is going to be equal to 12. Before I get into doing the actual calculation, I'm going to do a quick estimate to think about what answer I should be getting, sort of the ballpark answer that I'm going to be getting in there. So if I'm starting with 25 and ending up with 12, 12 is obviously smaller than 25, and 12 is pretty close to half of 25, right? So, because if it had been 24 times something equals 12, we'd see the relationship right away that it's exactly half. So we know that this number is probably going to be near 0.5, which of course is equal to a half. So that's the kind of ballpark where we want to end up. Now remember, if you've got 10 and you divide it by 2, you get 5. But as soon as you know that, you also know that 10 divided by 5 is going to be equal to 2. So if we want to know that 12 divided by something that we don't know is equal to 25, then we also know that 12 divided by 25 is equal to the something that we don't know. So now we just need to do this division, and we can do it as long division if we want, to get the answer that we need. So we have 12 divided by 25. Obviously 25 doesn't go into 12, so we're going to have to add some decimals to allow us to finish the answer. So now we've got 25 going into 120. Well, how many times does 25 go into 120? We know that 4 25s will give us 100. If we subtract that, it gives us 20. Bring down another 0. 25 into 200 goes 8 times. That goes exactly. With a remainder of 0, I put the decimal place directly above where I started with the decimal in this number, and I've got an answer of 0.48. Well, 0.48, thankfully, is very close to 0.5 in my estimate. So the solution here is 12 divided by 0.48 is equal to 25. Choose a whole number for the blank to make each sentence true and explain why your choice makes sense. 175 divided by a decimal number is less than 500. So we look at our numbers, we see we've got 175 here, and the answer is going to be 500. So the number got bigger, which definitely confirms that we've got a decimal place going on there. So remembering that same thing, that 10 divided by 5 equals 2, therefore 10 divided by 2 equals 5. We've got 175 divided by something is equal to 500, we can turn that around to say 175 divided by 500 is equal to that something that we don't know. Once we're confronted with that, we can go ahead and do our long division. So 500 doesn't go into 175, but it will go into 1,750. So we've added some zeros here after the decimal place. Put our decimal place up there in the quotient. Now, 500 into 1750, into 1,750. Go 3 times. 3 times 5 is 1,500. Subtracting that gives us 250. Bring down another 0. 5 into 2,500 goes 5 times. 5 times 500 is 2,500 with a remainder of 0. So 175 divided by 0.35 is equal to 500. Now our question was said they want to be a little less than 500. So in order to get this number smaller, we need to make what we're dividing by larger. Think about this. If you have 10 cookies and you divide it by 2 people, each of you gets 5 cookies. But if you have 10 cookies and you divide it by 5 people, you only get 2 cookies. So the quotient, the result of your division calculation, gets smaller as the number that you're dividing by gets larger. So if we want this to be a little bit less than 500, we need to make this number just a little bit bigger. So 175 divided by 0.36 would solve the problem for us. If we check it on our calculator, 175 divided by 0.36 is equal to 486.111, and I would say that's a little bit less than 500. Calculate 200 divided by 0.1 and 200 divided by 0.4. Compare the results of your calculations, and what conclusions can you draw? Remember, dividing by a fraction, like 1/10, is the same as multiplying by 10. The other part that you need to recognize from that is that dividing by a fraction like 4/10 is the same as multiplying by the opposite of that, by 10 divided by 4. So let's see how that works in this case. If we've got 200 divided by 0.1, how would we look at that? So we want 200, doing it as long division, 0.1. Well, when we want to do long division, we can take off the decimal, move the decimal place, and add a 0 for each decimal place that we moved. So 2,000 divided by 1, fairly obviously, is just 2,000. So 200 divided by 0.1 is 2,000, which of course is the same as saying, just what we said, 200 times 10. Now let's look at 200 divided by 0.4. And again, we'll do the calculation on the side. 200 divided by 0.4. And we move the decimal place 1 position, right? So we've moved it from here over to here. So we now have a whole number there. That means we had to add a 0 here. So 4 goes into 20. 5 times 4 is 20. With a 0 remainder. And no matter how many zeros we bring down, we're just going to get zeros up top. So 200 divided by 0.4 is 500. You can see also that this is the same as saying 200 times 10, and then dividing that by 4. So 200 times 10 is 2,000, and 2,000 divided by 4 is equal to 500. Now the important thing to note here is that we went from 0.1 to 0.4. That's a multiple of 4. So we're dividing by something that was 4 times as big. The result in our answer is that it got to be 1/4 the size, or 4 times smaller. So it went from 2,000 to 500, so effectively, while this side was getting multiplied by 4, this other side was getting divided by 4. So if you divide by something that's 4 times bigger, the result you'll get is 4 times smaller. Calculate 450 divided by 0.6 and 450 divided by 0.2 and compare the results of your calculations. I could start with either of these, but I'll start with the 450. divided by 0.6. I move the decimal place one position and add a 0 by doing that. So now 6 into 45, 7 6s are 42, subtracting that leaves us 3, bring down a 0. 6 into 30 is 5, which is exactly 30 with a 0 remainder. And no matter how many zeros we bring down, of course, it will just leave it at 0. So 450 divided by 0.6 is equal to 750. So from that, can we figure out what 450 divided by 0.2 is? Well, we're dividing by something that is only 1/3 the size. So we're dividing by a much smaller number. So if we're dividing by a smaller number, that means the number over here is going to get bigger. So if this got 1/3 smaller, that means this will be 3 times bigger. So we could say that's 3 times 750, which is 2,250. And if we wanted to double check that process by doing the long division, we could go ahead and do that. 450 divided by 0.2. Take off the decimal, move it one position this way, which means we have to add another 0. 2 into 4 goes 2 times. Subtract and we get a 0 remainder, bring down the 5. 2 into 5 again goes 2 times. This time we have a 1 remainder. Bring down the 0. 2 into 10 goes 5 times exactly. And we bring down the 0, goes 0 times. So that confirms our answer that 450 divided by 0.2 is 2,250. Lesson summary. One meaning of division involves asking how many of one number fit into another number. For example, 6 divided by 2 can mean how many 2's fit into 6. 1 divided by 0.25 asks how many sets of 2500s, or 1/4, fit into one whole. So if you already have a sense of how large 0.25 is, knowing that it's a quarter, you can see that 4 sets of 0.25 make up a whole. And if you think about currency, our 25-cent pieces, if you have 4 of them, they equal 100 cents or a loonie. So the key terms to get out of this were quotient, which is the result of dividing. So when you see 20 divided by 4, the 4 is the quotient. Now it's your turn.